You're watching a movie alone on the couch. Nothing especially sad happens, just a small, quiet moment between two characters. And suddenly, your eyes fill up. You wipe your face fast, almost embarrassed. Even though nobody's watching, why does something so small make your body physically leak? Here's the strange part. No other species on Earth does this. Dogs don't cry when they're heartbroken. Elephants don't weep at a funeral, even though they mourn in other visible ways. Every land animal produces tears to protect and lubricate its eyes. But as far as science has ever documented, you are the only species that cries because of what you feel, not just because of what irritates your eyes. Let's break that down, because it's a bigger distinction than it sounds. Your eyes actually produce 3 different types of tears, and only one of them is emotional: basal tears. Keep your eyes moist constantly, all day, without you noticing. Reflex tears flood out when something irritates you, like onion fumes or a speck of dust. And then there's the third type, the one triggered by grief, joy, frustration, or being moved by something meaningful. That third type is where things get genuinely strange. Biochemist William Frey ran a study comparing these emotional tears to reflex tears triggered by onions, and found they weren't chemically identical. Emotional tears contained measurably different concentrations of stress-related hormones and proteins. Your body isn't just leaking fluid when you cry from feeling. It may actually be offloading something internally, almost like a stress release valve. Your body evolved specifically for emotional overflow. So the obvious next question is why? Why would evolution build something so visible, so hard to hide, apparently just to release a feeling? Evolutionary psychologist Orrin Hassan proposed an answer that reframes the entire behavior. Hassan's research suggests that emotional tears aren't a byproduct at all. They're a signal, deliberately shaped by evolution, to be seen by others. Tears blur your vision. They physically distort your face. In a world where humans constantly rely on subtle facial cues to judge threat, intention, and trustworthiness, tears do something unusual. They temporarily impair your own ability to track a threat, while making your emotional state completely unmistakable to everyone around you. That's a strange trade to make if survival is only about self-protection. But it makes a lot more sense if survival often depended on your group, not just your own senses. A visibly crying person is an honest signal. It's very difficult to fake convincingly, and it clearly communicates vulnerability, submission, grief, or overwhelm without a single word. In small, ancestral groups, that signal mattered enormously. If you were in genuine distress, showing it clearly and unmistakably could pull in help, comfort, or protection from people around you. A predator doesn't cry. A rival doesn't cry to manipulate you convincingly for long, because sustained emotional tears are hard to produce on command. Crying works as a signal specifically because it's costly and hard to fake. There's another layer buried underneath this, and it goes all the way back to infancy. Researcher Ad Vingerholtz, who has spent much of his career studying why humans cry, has argued that adult emotional crying likely evolved from infant crying, one of the earliest and most powerful attachment signals in the animal kingdom. A crying infant isn't performing anything. It's making an urgent, involuntary appeal for connection and care, one that its own survival completely depends on. Vingerholtz suggests that as humans evolved more complex social bonds into adulthood, that same wiring never fully disappeared. It just adapted into a broader adult signal for connection, especially in moments of overwhelming emotion, whether that's grief, love, or even being moved by a stranger's small act of kindness. This is why crying doesn't just happen during sadness. It happens during weddings, during reunions, during moments of pure relief. The common thread isn't misery. It's an overwhelming surge of social or emotional significance. The exact kind of moment your ancestors' survival and belonging depended on communicating clearly to the people around them. Here's the part that flips the whole story though. For most of modern history, crying, especially for certain groups, has been treated as a weakness to suppress, rather than a signal to trust. But biologically, that framing runs directly against what tears actually evolved to do. Suppressing an honest social signal doesn't erase the internal stress response driving it. It just removes the part where other people could see it and respond. You still get the physiological buildup. You just lose the ancient benefit tears were built to unlock. The chance that someone nearby notices and moves closer instead of walking away. Which brings us back to that couch. Alone, tearing up at a quiet moment in a movie, nobody else is watching with you. Your body doesn't actually know the difference between an audience and no audience. It's running an ancient script built for a world where someone almost always would have seen you. A world of small tribes, shared fires, and constant physical proximity, where an honest emotional signal reliably reached someone who could respond to it. Today you might cry in an empty room, phone in hand, nobody around to see it at all. But the mechanism firing underneath that moment is exactly the same one that once pulled entire groups of ancestors closer together during grief, joy, or crisis. There's a common belief that crying always makes you feel better afterward, a kind of built-in emotional release valve. The actual research on this is more complicated than the popular idea suggests. Studies tracking people's mood before and after crying have found that the outcome depends heavily on context. Crying alone, with no comfort afterward, often doesn't improve mood much at all. But crying in the presence of someone supportive, someone who responds with comfort, consistently shows a much stronger improvement in emotional state afterward. That detail matters enormously, because it suggests the biological payoff of crying was never really about the tears themselves. It was about what tears were supposed to trigger in the people around you. The relief isn't really in the crying. It's in being seen and responded to while crying. Your ancestors' bodies weren't rewarding the tears directly. They were rewarding connection, and tears were simply the mechanism built to summon it. This might explain something that seems contradictory at first. Why does crying alone in a quiet room, with nobody responding, sometimes leave you feeling worse instead of better? If tears were purely about internal stress release, crying alone should work just as well as crying with someone else nearby. But it often doesn't, and that gap points directly back to Hassan's signaling theory. A signal that goes completely unanswered doesn't get switched off. Your nervous system stays activated, waiting for a response that never comes. There's also a striking cross-cultural pattern worth noticing here. Anthropologists studying grief rituals across dramatically different cultures, from public mourning ceremonies to communal wailing traditions, have documented that visible, shared crying is an extremely common feature of how humans process major loss together. Very few cultures treat grief as something meant to be processed silently and alone. Almost universally, there's some ritualized space for tears to be seen by the group, not hidden from it. That consistency across unrelated cultures, separated by oceans, language, and thousands of years, is exactly the kind of pattern evolutionary psychologists look for when arguing that the behavior isn't just cultural, but built into shared human biology first, and shaped by culture second. Meanwhile, animal researchers have specifically looked for anything resembling emotional tears in other species, and the results consistently come up empty. Elephants show clear behavioral signs of grief. They linger near the remains of herd members, sometimes for days, in behavior that looks unmistakably like mourning. But their eyes don't produce emotional tears the way yours do. Chimpanzees display distress through vocalizations, body language, and social withdrawal, again, without producing tears tied specifically to emotional state. This absence across our closest relatives makes the human case even stranger. Somewhere along our evolutionary path, a mechanism originally built purely for eye lubrication and protection got rewired into something else entirely. A visible, involuntary, honest broadcast of internal emotional states to everyone nearby. Which brings this full circle to a strange, modern contradiction. You now live in a world with more ways to broadcast your feelings than any generation in human history. Text, video, posts, voice messages, and yet actual in-person emotional crying, the specific ancient signal your body evolved to summon real-time comfort, often happens more privately now than ever before, behind closed doors, muted, or turned away from a screen entirely. The signal hasn't changed, the audience has. So the next time your eyes fill up over something small, know this: you're not malfunctioning, you're running one of the most specifically human signals evolution ever built. A costly, honest, impossible to fake broadcast of exactly what you're feeling. Every other species on this planet waters its eyes to protect them. You're the only one that waters them to be understood.